Hi there, this is Dr. Rob Silas, the Carb Addiction Doc. In the last podcast, we discussed why carbohydrates are not essential for human consumption and why food, which is essential for human consumption, doesn't make us fat, but exclusively carbohydrates do. Now, let me help you to understand why I call myself the Carbohydrate Addiction Doc, but also why it is possible to get fat and why we become fat and diabetic and sick from carbohydrates but not from food. And here's the critical thing. Yes, there is huge value to eating food. Obviously, it keeps us alive. And we feel great when we eat food, but there's a starting point and a stopping point. It's called hunger and satiety, and they're very quite tightly mediated. When it comes to eating carbohydrates, just like alcohol, we do not consume carbohydrates. We don't select carbohydrates for their nutritional value, despite what the world out there tells us, oh, these are healthy for you. That's like telling an alcoholic a glass of red wine is healthy for you. Here's what alcohol and carbohydrates do. Both alcohol and carbohydrates are incredibly powerful activators of what's called the endorphin system. The endorphin system gets activated by sugar and starch of any kind and by alcohol of any kind, as it does by nicotine, by heroin, by crystal meth, by all those other drugs. So when we eat carbohydrates, just like with alcohol, the primary intent of eating that is not for the nutritional value. At a subconscious level, it is primarily for the high, for the endorphin value. Now, historically, there was value to doing that. Why biologically have we selected that out in our evolution? Because survival. Carbohydrates in the hunter-gatherer society were really only available in abundance just before winter. Why is that important? Because winters were harsh and sometimes we did not have access to adequate food stores during winter to survive. So by being able to eat carbohydrates in abundance, by not having a stopping point, and really where availability was our stopping point, we could pig out on apples and fruit that was available to us and berries and that kind of thing for a few months before winter. And yes, even though we became transiently insulin resistant, that was okay because it allowed us to fatten up. The human body tolerates a brief period of illness, which is really what insulin resistance is, in order to fatten up. So that during the starvation periods of winter, we have access to our fat when our insulin levels are low. Squirrels do that, bears do that, all hibernating animals do that. While human beings don't hibernate, that's how smart we are biologically. That even though we don't hibernate, we were able to store this fat for winter. And at the end of the winter, we're lean again and we repeat the cycle. Well, what's happened, unfortunately, in an era where we human beings said, okay, there's an advantage to eating these carbohydrates, let's learn to grow them, and we became farmers, and we became crop growers, and the majority of crops are high in carbohydrates. So we had this steady supply of carbohydrates. Still fairly scarce in the early farming era, but now in the modern industrial revolution era, we can make carbohydrates, we can manufacture them. They're always available. And we've genetically engineered apples from being these tiny little sour things with a little bit of carbohydrate to being these massive things with 30 to 40 grams of carbohydrates in a big apple. And then we've produced all this junk food that is super high in carbohydrates, and we've added a little bit of fat to augment the carbohydrate high. That's a little bit like spiking your heroin fentanyl. But the point is, we've taken a biologic advantage, occasional carbohydrate consumption for survival, and we've exploited it without even knowing it to create this abundance of carbohydrates. But the fact remains that carbohydrates are powerful endorphin activators. They make us high. Okay? So the next thing that happens, everybody can eat carbohydrates, everybody can drink alcohol. So why do some people become fat? Why do some people become alcoholics and others don't? It is absolutely appropriate if you're a healthy, otherwise normal person, when you've had a rough day, when you're anxious or stressed or depressed or angry or afraid or frustrated or just bored or having fun, to activate the endorphin system with something a consumable that just dissipates that emotional tension. It's okay to come home after a rough day and have a beer, a glass of wine, a shot of whiskey as a powerful activator of the endorphin system. And the endorphin system is there primarily to relax emotional tension, to relax this tension that builds up in the brain from being productive. So when I have that glass of wine after a long day when I come home, it just helps me to give me instant tranquility, gratification, relaxation, and it's a very powerful, positive way to relax me from time to time. But it's only of value without harm if in addition I have a variety of other things I can do to activate the endorphin system, to relax me, to help me to deal with my emotional needs. The issue there is diversity. However, more and more as human beings, we focused on productivity. You got to work harder, you got to work longer, you got to be the best you can be. Excellence, excellence, excellence. And the more we strive to be productive, the more our brains are focused on productive and you can never do enough, you got to do more, more, more. What we're doing is creating all this emotional distress, this emotional tension, and we don't have a way to let off that steam. We've become this pressure cooker without a valve. So we build up all this emotional tension, and then one day vicariously, we discover a drug that gives us instant euphoria, instant tranquility, instant relaxation. Wow, I never felt that good. It might be after a knee surgery, the doctor prescribes you some Oxycodone. And yeah, the Oxycodone helps with the knee, but man, it just gives you this relaxation. That's what opioids do. They activate and deflate this emotional tension. Wonderful, wonderful feeling. That's what alcohol does. That's what nicotine does. That's what crystal meth does. And that is what carbohydrates do. They relax us. And they're fine to consume from time to time if you have a variety of other ways to deal with your emotional needs. Just like having a drink. Having an apple, having a little bit of ice cream, absolutely fine every now and then. But here's the problem. In the era of productivity, a lot of people have not built up or they've sacrificed the diversity of action-based emotion management systems. What's the difference? Well, you get instant activation of the endorphin system by a consumable drug or a behavior like an orgasm during sex, like gambling. Those are things that give you instant gratification. There are other things we do as human beings with the survival advantage that give us slow, gradual endorphin activation. So, for example, physical activity. Something creative. If I'm listening to music, if I'm painting or drawing, if I'm out in the yard gardening, if I'm doing photography. All of those things are endorphin activators for certain people. A spiritual moment, yoga, a meditative moment, an empathetic chat with a friend, a partner, a wife, a husband, a partner. Great ways to activate the endorphin system to relax. Those are the healthy ways of relaxing. But if you don't have those or you're not able to use those, you build up all this emotional tension. And what is now ubiquitously available in our environment, everywhere you look, sugar and starch. And what's worse than that is there are a lot of people out there that are telling us that this form of sugar is healthy. Oh, these apples are so healthy for us. Oh, it's natural sugar. Absolute bullshit. Sugar of any form is not necessary for human survival. Sure, it's okay to eat from time to time, but if you've got all this emotional tension built up and you suddenly find this euphoria from eating carbohydrates, now you bond with them and you start to consume more and more and more in a ubiquitous, continuous way. We call that snacking. No different than a smoker going outside continuously smoking. No smoker smokes 20 cigarettes at one time. They distribute them throughout the day, little puff here, little cigarette there, and by the end of the day it's 20. Fat people, diabetics, little bit here, little bit there, they're even oblivious to doing it. So when you talk to a fat person, oh, no, I don't snack. Well, excuse me, you're fat. How's that possible? That's like an alcoholic saying they're drunk, but they didn't drink. It doesn't work that way, but we're oblivious to it. We don't know how often we do it because we do what we do without even thinking. So the point is, over time, we build up a relationship, not with food because it doesn't do it for us, but with a drug called carbohydrates that becomes our dominant mechanism of emotional management. No longer just dissipating the emotions, but now numbing, soothing, and obliterating them. The carbohydrates become like a club that we use to club our depression and our anxiety and our stress. But here's the problem. While alcohol, nicotine, carbohydrates give us that instant euphoria, that instant tranquility, on the back end of their consumption is negativity, harm, guilt, and repression of the very issues that are driving our emotions. If I've had a rough day and I drink a bottle of Jack Daniels and I relax and I pass out, I've obliterated the emotion, but I've disconnected from what caused the bad day, and I become a less effective human being. In exactly the same way, if I come home and I down a tub of ice cream, or eat a bag of M&Ms, or even eat a pile of mashed potatoes or a pile of pasta, it relaxes me, it gives me that euphoria, it disconnects me from all those issues. And as I become tolerant to my drug, I need more and more and more, hence the opioid crisis. And if I'm eating more carbohydrates, I'm becoming fat and sick. And I'm overwhelming my insulin response. And I'm developing the diabetogenic diseases. That's how we become fat and sick. Obesity is a substance abuse problem. It is not a calorie problem. It's a substance abuse problem because historically there was value, now there's harm. It should fall in the same category as alcohol, nicotine, and opioids. And ultimately, an obese person is a person with a mental health issue. Now, oh no, I'm fine. It's not about the stigma. Really what it comes down to is that anybody with a drug addiction, with a substance abuse problem. What's a substance abuse problem? It is where you use a substance to manage your emotional needs to the point of harm, and you ignore the harm to continue the relationship. That's an addiction. You've lost control of the relationship. So now to ask you to control that relationship on some diet is the same as asking an alcoholic to drink less. It's called harm reduction. It just doesn't work because you're asking someone to control a relationship they have no control over. And yeah, they can tightly control that for a while and maybe lose some weight or be sober. But when life throws a curveball at them, boom, they go straight back to the same drug. Because if you look in the emotion management toolkit, they've got carbohydrates and cobwebs. So for a while, they can take those carbohydrates out. But unless they replace them with better skills and better tools, they're never, ever going to get away from the carbohydrates. And that's one of the primary reasons that diets fail. They give you access to your drug of choice and ask you to control it. That's lunacy. That's crazy. It doesn't work. And that's why diets fail. But to understand obesity and to understand diabetes, we have to understand the fact that carbohydrates are a non-essential food and they are a highly endorphin activating drug. Obesity is a substance abuse problem, not a weight problem or a calorie problem. Once you understand that and you choose to be healthy over choosing to use carbohydrates to manage your emotional needs, then you can begin to heal. No different than an alcoholic choosing to be sober. I hope you enjoyed that podcast. If you did, please click the subscribe button and become a subscriber to my YouTube channel. And if that message resonated with you and made you think, and you made a decision to do more to help yourself, but you need help, please come and see us. Set up a consultation. We can do it in person in my offices in Palm Beach Gardens at 561-627-4107 or in Jacksonville, Florida at 904-410-3934. I also do some long-distance consults telephonically or on Zoom. Set that up as well by calling 561-627-4107. We help people to manage their diabetes better and also to get started in obesity management. Or if you've had bariatric or obesity surgery and are struggling, give us a shout. We can help to get you back on track.